What's going on, guys? Aarava here, and welcome back to my Let's Talk F1 2017 series. In this one for the McLaren 2017 Challenger, the McLaren MCL32. And here it is, finally. And after all the kind of teasing and kind of little tweets and kind of all the hints, it's finally there. We can stop talking about the damn colour and just talk about the performance. But there it is, the brand new McLaren livery on their brand new 2017 car. Flashes of orange, white and black all masked together. Let me know what you think of the livery in the comments below. I like the fact it's just different. I like the fact they finally just went with what the fans wanted. Some orange there on the car. And they finally actually just decided to actually change it. I think they could have done it a little bit better in some areas in terms of the way they've decided to design it, but I just like the fact it's not just fully black, so I'm happy in that regards. As a sort of, obviously I support Jenson Button, so I have a bit of an interest in McLaren, what they look like, so I'm sort of satisfied in that way. Let's look, though, at the aerodynamics of the car. A very, very intriguing car in a few different areas, especially the rear wing, the front end nose as well, and a few different things to note with the barge board section. But straight away, McLaren again see the S duct. You can see the little inlet there circled in green, and then the outlet there pretty bold as the nose cone gets attached to the bulkhead. But the more interesting part is, if you move further down, is these three slats on either side of the nose cone on the end plate, where the end plate attaches to the actual front wing main plane. Three slats to try and allow airflow to pass through, so that will probably be to channel straight into the winglets and the vanes they've got underneath the car. And so they're angled at different, the three slots are angled in different ways, so they'll be directing flow to specific parts of the winglets underneath the car they'll want as well. They've got a similar sort of slat concept in the rear wing, but even to more of an extreme. That's more for cutting drag, whereas this front wing section won't be necessarily to cut drag in this area. It'll be more to actually just channel the flow and use a bit of flow control there with the slot gaps to actually force the air to where they want it to go into the bottom winglet underneath the car, which you can't really see in detail from this shot. If we move on to the actual brake plates and calipers that you can see, they've got a very nice intricate design. You've got this wing curving inwards to the car. You've got a different entire section of an inlet just before the main inlet. The bigger inlet on the left-hand side is the main one, probably for the brake cooling. And then I'm guessing the smaller one may just be for passing through, or they may be looking to maybe do the blown wheel nut, perhaps. It's intriguing that McLaren have never run the blown wheel nut, really. So maybe that's something they're looking forward to, but a sculpted plate on the front end leading edge, you can see as it curves outwards as well on the top edge. Moving to the side pod area of the McLaren, their upright is a lot like the Renault car upright, actually, a kind of dog leg structure, although without any vanes like the slot gaps like the Renault showed. But the McLaren bargeboard area, quite simple actually when you compare it to Mercedes, Ferrari. So here's hoping they develop that quite a bit, because at the moment, compared to those teams, you've got less elements there actually going on. But at the same time, what they do have is quite finely sculpted. You got the Johnny Walker main barge board that actually attaches on to the chassis, so that's sort of the same style that you've got for the Mercedes and the Ferrari car, where they've got winglets coming off the chassis. McLaren have decided to merge the barge board to connect in to that winglet connecting to the chassis. So in that sense, they've got the same sort of concept as Mercedes and Ferrari. And so far, we've only seen those three teams have concepts of winglets coming off, or vanes coming off the chassis, the main actual chassis structure, monocoque structure. You've got the floor extension on the very widest part of the floor, and then you've got this first element of the barge board, which kind of stops abruptly, and then you've got the second main barge board element that's cut in two there by the J and the O of Johnny Walker, so a bit of a split way, so it allowed the air to go through. That's purely to just cut drag, allows the air to go straight through, and that will maybe go towards the inlet of the actual side pod for the radiator cooling. On the top of the side pod, they've got one vortex generator right on the actual edge, very, very edge, actually, quite aggressively there, and then they've got one upright vortex generator coming off, you can see on the right hand side of it. And then from this angle, you can see the very dramatic, aggressive Coke bottle shape that McLaren have gone for ever since 2015. You know, they've always worked with Honda quite a bit to make sure the engine gets packaged as tight as possible at their rear end, because that's been a huge concept for them, to really just get that rear as skinny as possible at the rear end. If we then brighten the photo and look back at the inlet of the side pod, you can see the side pod inlet is actually split into two different sections, and also features a third smaller section with gills facing in. So Honda have talked talked a lot about re-engineering the engine, changing how the format is, how it's laid out. So that may be an inkling or two. Maybe they've tried to improve cooling by splitting different sections quite a bit, especially with the smaller grilled section. That's quite peculiar to me. And so maybe that's going to a specific part that Honda have talked about. In their press conference when the car launched, the Honda director, overseeing the engine, I'm guessing the development, spoke about the fact that McLaren and Honda have had to work together to compromise on areas and make sure that McLaren get what they want in terms of the aero and the packaging, but Honda also get what they want in terms of trying to get enough cooling to that car, trying to get what they want to that car in specific areas like that. So maybe McLaren have had to compromise with how tight they have the inlet, or the exact shape of the side pod, perhaps. So that's something that they're going to have to work on. And obviously, that's a big thing for this car. You're going to see it when we get to the rear wing. Cutting drag, trying to be as slipstream as possible with this car seems to be a big theme, because obviously I think the Honda engine, as much as they've improved it, I don't think it's going to be a big miracle if you think the Honda engine is going to be able to match the Ferrari, the Mercedes straight off the bat when the season starts. So I still think a lot like what we've seen from previous seasons of McLaren, they've tried to cut drag and they tried to make the car as slippery as possible in areas where they can afford to, but at the same time, you can see their front wing. It's still very complex. It's an evolution of the front wing they had from last year. We saw them actually trialing it at USA last year, and it's pretty much the same sort of evolution of that. So you can see in areas they're still going complex, but in many areas they're also trying to cut drag. But if we move on to the rear ends, a very, very unique and interesting take on the rear wing. They've got two different sections of the rear wing. The first, the leading edge, is shaped like a dogleg coming inwards on itself. And then they've got a series of array of slot gap vanes coming off, and that actually go straight down and don't follow the same curvature of the rest of the rear wing. The curvature is there because that's the regulations, but it looks like they've found a place to put straight slot gap strakes down, and that's just such a unique concept we've not seen. And even the kink itself on the rear wing, you can see kinks in dramatically and has its own slot gap to cut drag there. So McLaren have really focused on the end plate to cut drag and to really manipulate the air as much as they can on that very important part of the car where all the wake is coming off. They're wanting to try and get the diffuser and the rear wing working as efficiently as possible. Moving back to the front of the car, they've got these two little divots on the camera mount of the car, so they may be to let air straight through, or perhaps even is somehow connected to the S-duct system. And then we're going to move all the way to the rear of the car and really get a good look at this. I need to say a huge thanks to my friend Samvir, who was at the event, so he was able to take this photo for me, so thank you very much to him if he is watching maybe. But here's the rear wing, the end plate, so sculpted, and you can see where the NRF is. You've got that extension of the flat side of the end plate that goes over the bent-in part of the rear wing. So really awesome concept, and you can just imagine the air is going to get affected by all those little slots and go in between the slots, and actually the way they've streaked it down will actually mean the air maybe bleeds downwards and helps create a vacuum seal between that rear tire and the rear end plate, which I've mentioned in a few other videos. They need to try and get that kind of vacuum seal on that part of the car to make sure the diffuser isn't affected by air coming on the side of it off the sidewall of the rear tire. Speaking of the diffuser, they blocked off the diffuser in the studio shots, in the shots at the McLaren launch event. So does that mean they've got some radical new concept for the diffuser, perhaps? I mean, we literally have no idea what they're hiding there. May just be a bit of just hiding on the fact they just don't want to show the diffuser. It may not be anything special, but I would imagine there's got to be something in the diffuser that they want to hide. I mean, otherwise there would be no reason to block it off. So it's going to be very interesting to see pre-season testing straight away if photographers try and grab a photo of that to see what on earth is going on behind that behind that diffuser. And then if you look to the right-hand side of the photo on the back plate of the end plate, you can see that bigger, larger cut. But you can just generally see that profile of all the cuts they've made in that end plate and the overhang they've got. Very, very intriguing. To cut drag, bleed air down towards that vacuum seal to make the diffuser work harder. Very, very, very nice rear wing, I think. A very, very complex one. And finally, if we look at a shot from going bird's eye view, it's a little bit pixelated because it's not the best resolution ever, but you can see some more veins and slats coming behind the barge wall that were hidden in previous shots. So McLaren do have some detailing there behind to affect the flow even more once it passes through the barge board slot gaps. And then you can clearly see there that nice Coke bottle shape from the McLaren car. Still, I think Mercedes probably wins for the tightest rear end, I think, because Mercedes went for that double kink pink sort of side pod. I think they've managed to actually get it even narrower than the McLaren car, which is impressive because McLaren for the last 2 years, really the biggest department they were probably leading at only was the rear end, how tight their rear end was. But I think other teams have really caught up to that Coke bottle shape. But that has been the brand new McLaren. A lot of really interesting details, but at the same time, I hope for their sake that they're developing that barge board area, because it does look a bit simpler compared to Ferrari, Mercedes, maybe the teams they're aspiring to try and catch. Zach Brown said that he's not going to set any expectations so far for this season, so I think at the moment, really take it with a pinch of salt in terms of what their performance might be. I think if Honda have done the improvements they say they've done, and they can continue to develop that, obviously the token system is scrapped this year, they can develop as much as they want in season. I think it's a promising and building year for McLaren this year, but I wouldn't really count on them maybe getting anywhere close to a race win. That's just my personal thought, but I think it can be definitely a very building year where they make some real strides forward. But yeah, that's been the McLaren. Leave a like if you did enjoy it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below of the livery and the design, especially that rear wing. I just love that rear wing. That rear wing really is a lovely little quirky design there from them. But yeah, if you're new around here and do subscribe for weekly Formula 1 content, I've been aarava. Hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you guys next time.